On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Must unequivocally condemn this vile anti-Semitic act, and the government must enforce the law and protect Jewish Canadians from hate, violence, and intimidation. And the Minister of Public Safety should immediately and publicly condemn this act in solidarity with the Jewish community. Mr. Speaker.
That's the voice of Tamara Kronis, the new Conservative MP for Nanaimo Ladysmith on Vancouver Island, standing up in the House of Commons earlier this week to deplore the vandalizing of the National Holocaust Monument overnight, where somebody had coated it with red paint and a message that most people understood to be a protest against Israel's treatment of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Kronis wasn't the only MP to condemn the upsetting graffiti just down the road from where Parliament was sitting. A Liberal MP from the government side, Greg Fergus, did also, and Prime Minister Mark Carney said he was appalled. But it was the first time Kronis spoke up in the House on an issue that impacts her personally. For the 2.5 weeks since she first took her seat in the back row of the House, right in front of the curtain, Kronis has weighed in on other pressing political issues, especially the opioid overdoses killing people in her riding and homelessness. She purposely left the Jewish file responsibility to her new colleague Roman Baber. He sits one row ahead of her and 4 seats closer to the Speaker, and he's been on his feet several times already pressing the government on Jewish topics, even going after the Liberals' Minister of Public Safety recently, needling him to agree that anti-Israel street protesters are breaking the law by calling for intifada, although the minister didn't play ball. The two different approaches make sense, you'll agree, because while both Baber and Kronis are rookie MPs in the Conservative opposition, each resoundingly winning their respective ridings in April's election by over 5,000 votes, Baber's Toronto area constituency, York Centre, has the 4th largest Jewish population in the country and has been the target of many anti-Semitic hate crimes there since October 7th, while Kronis, who was born and raised in Toronto but moved her family out west after her daughter went there for school, represents Nanaimo Ladysmith, where the last census estimates there are only 230 Jews. But both Baber and Kronis assure the Jewish community we now have 2 more key advocates in Ottawa. I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. Welcome to North Star, formerly the CJN Daily. We're the flagship news podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Tamara Kronis and Roman Baber are 2/3 of the new crop of Jewish MPs elected in the federal election. Liberal Evan Solomon took the Toronto Centre riding. It was his first foray into politics. The former journalist is now a member of the Carney cabinet. We had hoped to have all 3 newcomers in our podcast, but Solomon's office has not responded to our invitation. The new MPs certainly kick-started their tenure in a whirlwind: swearing-in ceremonies, orientation boot camp, finding a place to live, reading a thick procedure book, and then the first day of Parliament, May 26th, finding their assigned seats, the election of a speaker, and the pomp and circumstance of the visit by King Charles and Queen Camilla to read the speech from the throne. On today's episode, you'll hear from Tamara Kronis first, and then Baber follows. Kronis' great-grandparents were Jewish immigrants who built the Junction Synagogue in Toronto's West End. Her father, Jules, became a lawyer, a lifelong Conservative Party activist, and philanthropist for the Jewish community. She's been a human rights lawyer representing Canada at the World Court in The Hague, an advocate for the LGBTQ community, and she's also opened her own jewelry design studio. I spoke to Kronis in Ottawa on May 30th at the end of her first week in Parliament, where she just had a meeting with CIJA, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, Canada's political Jewish lobby group. And she joins us again. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you had breakfast with CIJA in person or on Zoom?
Oh, in person. So I want to Hill during the weekdays and on the way to Nanaimo on the weekends, which is why the luggage is under my eyes no matter what I do.
Yeah. How many hours is it actually?
It's actually like 14 hours to get home.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, and that's every week. Like there's flights through Calgary, through Victoria, through Toronto. But I'm usually one, sometimes two stops before I get home. But you know what? Look, I mean, I have one of the most interesting jobs in the country. I have a beautiful constituency, and I'm a very lucky person to have. My dad used to say, "May all your problems be the problems of success," and my commute is a problem of success, and we'll deal with it, and it's great.
We watched with great interest this whole process that you've been through, this whole journey. And during the run-up to your election, you were careful to not downplay, but not to highlight your faith and your support for Israel because of threats, literally threats, that were happening to Jewish people who are high profile. And I'm wondering, now that you're actually elected, how are you going to navigate that?
I've never hidden who I am. I mean, if you go to my LinkedIn, if you go to my Facebook, I mean, you can see who I am. I don't think I've downplayed that. I think that the challenge for any MP is that your job is to represent your riding. And my riding is as diverse as any other riding in the country. And there are Jewish issues that need to be pursued, but there are also other issues that need to be pursued. And so the focus for me has been on serving all of my constituency. You know, the amazing thing about coming from a community is that you end up having something in common with folks that are in other political parties who are interested in, you know, anti-Semitism and other issues that affect the Jewish community in Canada. And so what's really nice about that is it actually does give us some common ground to build relationships. And where that leads to is Canadians right now very much would like to see their political parties and their political representatives working together in the interests of Canada.
Before the election, though, there were big divisions between the Jewish caucus of each major political party. They didn't even have their Hanukkah parties together this year for the first time. So
what I do know is that my own personal style is collaborative. I do make efforts to meet with and listen to and see and hear all people, the same way that the Canadian political system is filled with many different voices. Our Jewish communities are also filled with many different voices right now. And the same way that the Canadian politicians need to work on reduce the anxiety of Canadians, we need to do that also within our community.
What was it like? You were in Ottawa when the King and Queen were speaking in the joint opening of Parliament. How close did you get? Where were you? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a really interesting experience to sort of see the way that a throne speech works from the perspective of an MP and not as from the perspective of a guest or a member of the general public. And it was certainly an honor to meet the King and the Queen and to be able to exchange a few words.
So what did you say, and where was this meeting?
So it was in the hallway. So when they were coming out of the Senate, there were a number of MPs, and the King and the Queen sort of graciously stopped and shook our hands and said hello. And the contents of that conversation will remain private.
That is cool. Where do you sit?
So my seat is way in the back, right in the middle. I actually get to stare down at the Prime Minister. They say that there are no bad seats in the House of Commons, and I'm very happy with mine. My dad worked his way down my dad sold programs, and he started up in the Greys, and he worked his way down to the front door. And I'm very happy to be sitting in the Greys at the beginning.
And we're talking about a hockey arena, I assume?
Yes.
You mentioned your dad, and I know that we have done, of course, a beautiful profile of him when he passed away in January 2023. He was on your mind at your swearing in.
You're going to make me cry, Alex.
So I'm sorry for your loss, but I'd love to hear what you did.
he was an advocate, and he was authentically himself, and he fought for our community, and he fought for other communities, and he fought for what was right and for people to be able to achieve their goals and their dreams in life. And I miss him. He would have loved this, and I'm proud to be his daughter.
What, if anything, Jewish that you have with you to have a Jewish sort of flavor to your swearing in?
You take an oath as part of your swearing in, and instead of a Bible, I had my dad's Siddur, and I had my brother-in-law's Tanakh, and I said Shachayanu. So, I think it's beautiful that I can do my swearing in with the things that make that oath mean more to me.
I know that your campaign manager has been heralded by the Conservatives. I'm going to read it. He masterminded one of the most strategic victories, it says, flipping Nanaimo Ladysmith from NDP to Conservative for the first time since the riding was created, which is about 2012. How do you explain that complete reversal of a very progressive, traditional Green NDP area of Canada to be Conservative?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, I think the first thing is that the NDP, the current incarnation of the NDP, has completely abandoned their traditional base, that they've become less the party of workers and, quite frankly, more the party of us. And so in our case, we built a wonderful community. We need to make hard work pay off again in this country. We need to really see people from all walks of life. Ellen, as someone who has worked as both a lawyer and a goldsmith, I've been very aware of the different kind of reception I get when I introduce myself as one compared to when I introduce myself as another. And that's made me a real advocate for the trades. It is really important in this country to remember that everybody is equal, and that that whatever path people choose in their lives, they can make a contribution to Canada, and that all contributions are important. And so that's what they voted for. I mean, the issues in my riding are the cost of living, the addictions crisis, and housing.
You mentioned goldsmithing, so I have to ask, did you create anything special that you wore during the campaign for either yourself or to wear now in Ottawa? You could create a whole new line of Judaica.
I think that more than anything, our country is in a place right now where it really needs its representatives to be working full time. And so I will be giving up all of my non-MP activities because that's what's necessary right now. And I want to devote this time to serving my constituents and serving our communities. And I also want to immerse myself in this wonderful odyssey.
One thing I do want to end on is that you specifically in your maiden speech, I guess we call it, or your debut speech, was about a person in your riding who has fentanyl or drug issues in their family.
The connection that this has to my identity as a Jew is that our community knows what intergenerational trauma is. Our community always made space for people who are suffering. Tikkun Olam is very much a part of the values I was raised with. And when you look at the addictions crisis, there are a lot of parallels. I bring those experiences and those efforts with me to Parliament Hill, and why I think it's one of the things that I want to work on as much as I do.
We'll be having you on speed dial. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
I remember being told in the Soviet Union that you could not listen to the BBC, and you could not listen to the voice of America. You could even go to jail for passing around flyers that contained foreign views. That's why they called it the Iron Wall. And now, I hear Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that there's too much disinformation out there on U.S. platforms. So what's Mark Carney going to do? Is he going to put me behind the iron wall again, deciding what we can and cannot hear?
At his swearing-in ceremony, Roman Baber brought up his own much more recent immigration story. Born in St. Petersburg in 1980, his family moved to Israel first, then to the York Centre area of Toronto when he was 15. A free speech advocate, Baber served for a couple of years in the Doug Ford government as the MPP for York Centre. But after clashing with the Premier's mandatory mask mandate during COVID, Baber was kicked out of the party. He sat as an independent until 2022, when he ran for the leadership of the federal Tories against Pierre Poilievre and lost. In this election, he took on his riding's Liberal incumbent Yara Sachs, beating her handily by nearly 6,000 votes. I spoke to Baber on the very first day Parliament opened.
It's good to be with you.
Congratulations. Okay, so where's your seat?
I am about a third of the way through from the speaker in the fifth row. So I'm not in the last row. We can joke about it. This is not the Ford government.
Our listeners may not remember, but I have to ask. I was going to ask you later, but if you want to bring it up now, that's fine.
Let's just say I had a magnificent career getting to this place. It's okay to disagree on issues. That's why voters elect us to represent them. I had voiced a concern in the past that the Premier didn't particularly like, and so I parted ways with the Conservative caucus. But that speaks to the fact that clearly York Centre constituents expressed remarkable confidence in me. With 54% of the vote, I'm the only Conservative member of Parliament from the City of Toronto. It's a remarkable honor. And also, it speaks to Pierre Poilievre and his desire to entertain diversity of opinion in caucus. And what's in the past is in the past.
So what did you have to do for boot camp? Did they tell me about the courses you had to take?
Oh, well, first they gave me this big encyclopedia to read, about a quarter of the way through. It's been a remarkable experience because this is a very fast transition to Ottawa. It also involves a move to Ottawa, which is very complicated. But the House of Commons is a very interesting place to work and has a lot of processes and procedures beyond your parliamentary procedures. And so it's been a very fast-paced orientation.
So they're putting you up in a hotel till you get organized.
Correct.
With an apartment or something. And you said it's challenging. What does that look like for your family?
Of course, it's difficult to leave your loved ones behind, but also there's a lot of travel in this job. And so it's very taxing on your body. I got to get into better shape. But beyond the processes of the move and the transition, the remarkable honor bestowed on me by Canadians and the people of York Centre to be in the nation's capital, to walk among those Victorian buildings. I really hope that I will do justice to those magnificent institutions that form the cornerstone of Canada's democracy. Never mind where I'm staying. I'm incredibly lucky and I'm incredibly grateful.
But you didn't get a shadow cabinet post. So what are you going to be hoping to do, or have they told you what your work is going to be day to day?
They did articulate the fact that ropekeys typically do not get a shadow cabinet position to allow us to orient ourselves around Ottawa. And
when you were at the swearing in, which we watched on social media, who came with you and what sort of personal or even Jewishy, I don't even know, family things did you bring with you for that ceremony, if anything?
Well, the entire mishpucha came. My mother, my sister and her family, and 40 of my closest friends and volunteers. And I took the opportunity to use my swearing-in speech to address some of the issues that are important to myself and to Canadians. And in particular, I guess you saw a portion that are dedicated to the freedom of speech. I often say that freedom of speech is the most precious right of them all, because through speech we protect all other rights.
Okay, so how do you then navigate your well-known position on freedom of speech with bubble legislation and protection of worship communities, faith communities, and institutions, especially the Jewish one, but of course you also have others in your writing, Filipino, Christian, whatever?
First of all, bubble legislation on the face of it, at least according to a number of legal scholars, is lawful. It's constitutional. But the key is that there's a difference between protesting government, protesting policy, and protesting people. And so I think the desire behind bubble legislation is to protect people who are not public officials from hateful protest. Those that oppose Israeli government policy are welcome to protest at the legislature, at Parliament Hill, at Queen's Park, at City Hall, maybe the consulate itself, maybe some of the politicians, including myself, that are staunch supporters of Israel. But there is no need to protest everyday people that are trying to enter a synagogue or trying to enter a school, trying to enter a hospital. That is intimidation, which in itself may already be unlawful. I should be able to protest my own legislature, and I should be able to worship outdoors in my own synagogue, of which I was a member since 1995.
What shul is it?
It's the JRCC at 18 Rockford, yeah.
So you were the only Conservative candidate elected in south of Steeles in Toronto in a sea of Liberals. Why do you think that happened?
I think we worked very hard for close to 2 years. I've had name recognition coming in as the previously serving member of provincial parliament.
Plus, you ran for the Conservative leadership, too.
Finished fourth on the final ballot, which was a blessing, of course. And really top-notch ground game in that I have door knocked for almost 2 years, Nalin. And when you identify that many prospective supporters, compounded by the fact that we had hundreds, literally hundreds of volunteers on election day pulling out that vote, that is what I'd probably say what I owe my victory to.
I mean, because you beat the MP and Cabinet Minister Yara Sachs by almost 5,900 votes. So it's a lot. It's not a...
It's 54% of the vote. It was material vote.
Right. And it was actually 10% higher turnout than last election, too.
Yeah.
So people were engaged.
For sure. I would also have to say, I also have to give credit to the Jewish community that has clearly this time voted with Conservatives as they felt that the Liberal government has... either neglected them or outright took the opposite position of what we'd hope on safety, on our safety, and of course the conflict in the Middle East.
There were some dirty tricks allegations. Both sides were having issues in the election campaign, whether there were swastikas on flyers or the billboard. Someone put up a billboard showing Ms. Sachs holding or shaking hands with Mahmoud Abbas.
Yes, I did put a billboard of a picture of my former opponent with Mahmoud Abbas, alongside a picture of myself and Pierre, saying that we will support the Jewish community. And yes, my former opponent put a flyer with, I don't even want to repeat that.
Yeah, it was adjacent with campaign literature. Have you reconciled with her? Have you talked to her at all? Has there been any kind of post-election have a coffee or?
No. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
All right, we have time to talk about Canada, Israel. You mentioned that there's a lot of important issues for your community. We're speaking less than about a week after Canada and France and the UK issued that communique where they were rebuking the Israeli government, the Israeli war, humanitarian issues. What do you think your constituents want you to say?
Well, they would certainly not want me to say something that would get a thank you from Hamas, as Mark Carney got. We potentially have two roles to play. Number one, as legislators, I would ask for some clarity in the criminal code on a number of things. I know that, for instance, the Conservatives have proposed that we look at ways to apply more laws to the anti-disguise law that would prevent individuals that are engaging in protests or rallies from hiding their faces. And I actually think that most of these guys are cowards. And if they had to show their face, that a lot of those protests would fizzle. Another thing that I would be hoping to look or hope to suggest to some of my colleagues is that during Harper's years, Prime Minister Stephen Harper brought in legislation called Bill C-51, which made it criminal to promote terrorism. Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau has repealed that legislation in 2017. And so what we're left with is a criminal code offense that a lot of folks, the police, attorney generals struggle with.
It's a high bar. It's a big high bar. You're a lawyer, you know.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean that it should not be applied more often than we have been seeing in the recent past. Let me give you a perfect example, and that is the chant to globalize the Intifada. Intifada is a violent resistance. To encourage Intifada is to effectively incite to violence. And that brings me to the second role that the federal government can play, or that we can try and play at the federal level, and that is try and set a different tone. And that is what I've been trying to do for the last couple of days. I've put up a very strong statement, essentially calling out the leadership of the Toronto Police and Mayor Olivia Chow, asking them that greater efforts are made to stem this tide of effectively criminal behavior on our streets. And that includes hate speech.
Yeah.
So we've just articulated the domestic policy. On the international front, whenever the Liberals engage in moral equivocation between Israel and Hamas, they undermine Israel's ability to finish this war. This war has to finish with a decisive victory by the State of Israel. And that means that the State of Israel has to accomplish all of its goals, defeating Hamas, return of the hostages, and lasting security for residents of the South, and in fact, all residents of the State of Israel. Anything short of those accomplishments will encourage and result in, God forbid, another October 7th.
Okay, look, you're a Jewish MP now in the federal level, and it's a whole different threat in terms of what all the other MPs who are Jewish have had to deal with in terms of death threats, hate emails, even going from your car to your hotel. So I'm wondering, is that being taken care of now in a whole new level than you were used to when you were campaigning and as an MPP?
The people that work for the Sergeant of Arms and the Parliamentary Security Service are excellent professionals. And I trust their judgment, and I trust the kindness and the processes that they have shown me. I will not be deterred by anyone from speaking what I believe, and especially speaking on this issue. I was elected to serve the people of York Centre, and that includes, despite what the census says, that probably one of the largest Jewish communities in the country. And it's important for Jewish Canadians to know that they have another voice in Ottawa, a very strong voice in Ottawa, that will do their vote justice.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Aline.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, a podcast made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. With a total of 10 Jewish MPs out of 340 on Parliament Hill, it could be the biggest Jewish caucus in Canadian history. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany, and our executive producer is Michael Freeman, with the new music by Brett Higgins. Thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.